Today is probably the first day that I've woken up and been in full hay fever mode, you know. My eyes are just streaming. I just blown my nose so many times it's started to bleed, which is actually a significant problem. But yeah, I've just woken up this morning and I was so hay fevery that it reminded me that everything I've had so far isn't anywhere close to what I normally have hay fever. I've taken a tablet, hopefully I've got tissues at work and whatnot, but hopefully the air conditioning doesn't kick it in. Usually air conditioning doesn't help. To be fair, I normally only get it like just after it's rained. I think while I'm susceptible to all kinds of pollen, what's worse for me is like tree pollen, which usually I can dodge unless there's like a lot of humidity and it drives the pollen down a bit. Yeah, otherwise we've got a productive Monday. Got up nice and early, got a good to-do list, already chipped some stuff off it, but I got more things I need to do. I've got 2 days and then I've got a day off. I've like booked holiday for a day. So I've got to get some shit done so that I can get shit done on that day, you know? The guy who runs our automation tests was on holiday last week. First day back, freaking one of the microservice things breaks. And I say that, it looks like 9 of the 10 microservices just shut down on Friday afternoon, just for fun. So anyway, I spent a bit of time sorting that shit out. It's always like it was fine while it wasn't here. And then he comes back, first day, broke. Otherwise, a while ago, I figured out a way of creating a kind of acceptance test where I was able to test the code integrations without testing external dependency integrations to a certain extent. So I would generate an in-memory web server, generate web, and then mock out dependencies like MongoDB. Preferably, if I was using things like Entity Framework, I'd be able to use an in-memory Entity Framework database. But nothing like that exists for Mongo, so annoyingly I have to do that in the with mocks, which isn't fun. But today I spent some time trying to figure out how to do that for something that's not a web server, i.e. a MassTransit consumer. Specifically because my next chunk of my project is going to be quite heavily, it's difficult to replicate because I've got to do a load of stuff that only happens like once. It's really difficult to replicate and test it, and I'll have to keep doing like tear down stuff. There's a lot of cleanup. So what I'm doing is trying to implement that in the consumer. Minor differences are that it's a service fabric, so it's not hosted in the same way, and it's a MassTransit endpoint, not a web endpoint. So I've been spending my time trying to figure that out so that I could basically do TDD, but at that level. So the point is you get basically you test the workflow from the message bus, make sure that your database interactions are correct, not the database itself is correct, which is annoying, and then test that the Saga's in the correct state, and then just kind of build up these acceptance tests. Something I did for a microservice, which is where I was investigating it a while ago, and I'm like, let's see if I can pull that into my own project. So that's what I'm doing new. Quite good fun. I've got my acceptance tests up and running, and now I'm TDDing it. So I wrote the tests, and I'm working backwards to make sure that I've got the code working. With the exception of the database integration. This is the new microservice, so I haven't got that database interfaces ready yet. But as soon as I got that, I'm gonna mock it out. It's really annoying that you can't have an in-memory version of Mongo. It's like, because one of the things that always goes wrong with Mongo is, for me, is building up the builders and the filters and the updates and stuff. Like, you could just do that and it will just be wrong. Because of like just a minor dumb error. But there's no way of picking that up. There's no way, you can't unit test it. You can't thing it, but you can't do the test without having a database. And it's really freaking annoying. So, yeah. I've looked at things like Mongo to go, which is like a hack job. It's potentially spinning up a container might solve the problem, but it's cracking a sledgehammer to crack a walnut and all that kind of shit. So compared to in-memory entity framework, it's so much more complicated. But yeah, I'd prefer not to have to spin up a container just to run tests, because these are running at a unit test level at the moment, which is what I want. They're like basically big unit tests. And then that way you have shitload of unit tests a lot of these big things, really small integration things, which I can't really have because of Mongo, and then you just kind of get fewer and fewer and fewer, but because you've got so much heavy stuff up front, when it's quick and fast to run tests, means you can run a really big test suite without taking a long time, and that's the dream. But yeah, I feel like that MongoDB thing is a real pain in the ass. I'm gonna have to investigate options, but yeah, it's not fun. Great big chuffing helicopter. Just hovered overhead and then just fucked off. Just got off the phone from Dad, and he interrupted me thinking about what my database is going to store, which is what I've had problems with before. Firstly, naming it, because there's always the scenario where the microservices name works well for the name of the database, but then you get namespace issues. It's a pain in the fucking ass. So a combination of that, and also the scoping for this is like the generic name for what I'm about to do is pipeline. That's what people seem to be like coalescing on. So you've got like Bitbucket has pipelines, Azure DevOps has pipelines. It's like, so it's the pipeline service. Does it make sense for me to store in the database as pipeline? And do I separate out build and test? That's my question. Do I separate out build and test and have two different databases, one for build and one for test? Or do I have like a bigger model that has a build pipeline and a test pipeline? I think maybe that might be a better option. And is there going to be a scenario where you're going to want to build? Is there going to be a scenario, / I should be open to? I was just going to have one pipeline. And I'm going to have like version history and stuff stored in it. Is there going to be a scenario where you're going to want to do build, test, like, you know? Or is it going to be more like you just build, then test? All questions. I guess you could just do build and then test, and I don't need to worry about it for now. So I could separate them out logically into... So what would I call the total object? Build plan, pipeline? Fuck, it's pipeline. The problem is, because I very recently spent through some time going through like a refactor and a database shift, I'm acutely aware of how expensive that is. To a certain extent, a rename is as cheap as a rename, and it wasn't that expensive to do the change, in fairness. It was about 5 hours. And it was like, I was really long in the tooth, you know. By the time I was actually doing that, I was fucking a year into development of that microservice, basically. So it's not crazy expensive, just realised I need my glasses. But it's not cheap, it's not free. And half the problems arose because I badly structured the data. In the data, I sure didn't rename it. Oh my god. In programming, cache and validation and naming things. We've been shopping and I've thought about it. The answer is workflow. Workflows are the total domain object, and on that, part of it is the pipelines, of which basically what I was trying to do is I was trying to balance what I want in the end, but what I want in the end isn't what I need now, if that makes sense. So I'm like trying to hit two different things. I'm trying to make it easy for now, but also complicated for later. So what it's going to be, suitable for complex scenarios later. So what I've got is this workflow thing and then the pipeline. Because the pipeline's on the workflow, you can have multiple different types of that. And then I can store it in the workflow database instead of the pipeline database, since it's just a field on that and then blah, blah. The workflow basically just comprises of steps. And then the pipeline comprises of steps. And the first pipeline I'm going to create is just going to be called basically basic pipeline, and it's just going to be a build step and a test step. Complex basically just gives you pure access to the steps, etc. So it's kind of like abstraction layers on top of the steps. Genius. Otherwise, your boys have been shopping and watching TV and stuff. I'm heading to bed because it's been a long day. Actually, I didn't go to bed last night. I stayed up and did some work. Hello, Mr. Buddy. Hey buddy, how you doing, you little cutie pie? Look at this absolute babe. Oh, you're beautiful. God damn it. God damn, you're so beautiful. some sort of a dog, so bloody much. I know it's a cat. I just want a pet, all right? I just thought I'd chip through a little bit more programming. I'm at that annoying part of spinning up a new microservice where I've spun up the microservice, I've done all that simple stuff, and now I've just got to create a lot of shit to get the framework up and running. And then from that point on, it's quite quick and easy to extend. But I've got to do things like create the interfaces and create the implementations of stuff so that I can then extend that later. And it's just been a while since I've had to do all of that kind of stuff. So it's like, I've got to create the models instead of add something new to an existing model, and all that shit, you know, so it's good fun. But there's just a lot of stuff to chip through. Been trying to reduce the size of the PRs I've been doing into my own project, but this is just one of those ones that's just naturally huge. Because I'm basically creating, well, I've created 3 full legit projects and then 5 test projects just for this. So pretty good day today. I was trying to figure out a solution for something where I'm trying to assert that I'm interacting with mocks, but I don't know when I'm going to interact with them, because I'm dumping a message on a bus, some stuff's happening, and one of the things that's happening is the interaction with the mock. And I looked at, basically, when you do things like Selenium, you can do things like wait finds, where it'll wait 5 seconds, hypothetically, for a button to load on a web page, because the JavaScript takes a certain amount of time, shit like that. What I effectively wanted was a version of that, but for a mocking framework. I PR'd one made a PR against n substitute for it, but when I was writing the tests to make it work, to prove it worked, and I was running it on lots of different computers as I put it onto their build pipeline. Basically, I discovered it was quite fragile due to the way that, like, those frameworks work. They use some static data and stuff, and basically tests that were running in parallel were triggering the received trigger on my test when they shouldn't have been. So I backed that out. I've still got the PR for it, so I'm like leaving it there as like a feature that they could potentially look at, but I'm assuming they've looked at it before and deliberately not done it, to be honest with you. So I wasn't expecting to get it merged. I was expecting like I just thought I'd raise a PR if they wanted it, and then I'd make it proper, like do it better and make it tidier and whatnot. But I did like a proof of concept PR, asked them if it would be a feature that they'd be interested in. If not, then I could wrap it into one of my own NuGet packages. But I think that won't be the best option anyway. I found a workaround where I don't need to do anything like that, which is basically just set up the call beforehand. But now all I need to do is figure out how to interrogate the state of the saga, and we're laughing. I've only got on bloody well figured it out, boys and girls. Oh, I took my charger to work, so now I've got to go back downstairs just to find my charger, just to plug it back in again. I was finding that the what's it called? The built-in dependency injection / scenario context injection, which is what they call it, in SpecFlow, was a bit of a mess. But thankfully they support autofac, or there's a autofac NuGet package, which simplified it greatly. Means that I've improved the one that I'm running at home now is better than the one I wrote at work, because I didn't use autofac at work, and I just kind of hacked it into working at work. But I also wasn't doing anything half as clever at work. So I now have this ability. The only downside is I have a step that I run before I want to verify it happens, and I'm not happy about that step. I wish that step wasn't there. Because I basically have a step, like a given when then, where it's like, given I am expecting this to be created, when I do this, it's just like a bit bizarre, it's a bit backwards. But I can't, like I say, this then thing about trying to validate, why is all the drawers open in here? What's going on, fam? The fly got in during that escapade. I'm not sure what's going on in here, boys. But yeah, so I'm not, I've lost what I was talking about now. Now I've got autofac, I'm basically able to inject in where I want all of the different points. So I'm injecting in mocks for my repository, my database, but I'm using the real message bus, but not the real message bus. I'm using the real MassTransit, but a in-memory version of the message bus and an in-memory version of the Saga repository, which I'm then also injecting into DI, so I can then inject it into my tests, and then I can validate that things are happening. And I've now got a failing test which will pass when this feature's finished, which is the dream. Especially considering that a lot of the things that I'm going to be doing over this microservice are going to be all message bus driven stuff, not API driven stuff. So previously on the other things I was doing, it's quite user facing. To be fair, quite a lot of the recent stuff hasn't been user facing and it's just been a pain in the ass to test, but it was, that microservice was a bit late to introduce this new way of like splitting out the work. I mean, I can go back in and do it, but it's a bit late for that. And it's not that important, but it is important. Oh, where's. Either way, really proud of that. There's a good little bit of work gone in there that I am very much pleased with. But I'm going to end the video here, ladies and gentlemen. What else have we done today? Watched Stranger Things, which is good. I'm super happy with my automation tests. I now just have to finish off that microservice, which should be the day's worth of work. And I can do that day tomorrow. But that day tomorrow will be a different video for you. So, thank you very much for watching this video, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed it. I did. I'll catch you later.